X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, this is Zach Jenkins, and welcome to Battle of the Atom, a new X-Men podcast where we talk about all the stories from mutant history, and we see how they rank with each other. With me is my co-host Adam Reck. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today, Zach?
You know what? It's been a good day. It's been a real good day, and we're kicking off this podcast, which will be fun.
I know. I'm excited about this. This is great.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while now, and it's going to be jumping in.
I'm looking forward to this. Gives me kind of an excuse to dig into my continuity holes, things that I haven't read in a while. So this is great.
Yeah, that's going to be it's going to be real fun. So for the people who aren't me and Adam and don't know what we're doing here, we are going to be going through 3 X-Men stories every week and putting them on a giant list, ranking the best X-Men stories and the worst X-Men stories, and kind of everything in between. There's a lot of bad too. Like, look, I run Xavier Files, which this will be hosted under. I obviously like X-Men. Adam, you write the fabulous and underrated Bish and Jubes webcomic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the plug.
It's super underrated. Yeah,
I do those occasionally.
Yeah. So I mean, you like X-Men, but
Absolutely.
I think we can both say that there's some stinkers in there.
Oh, sure. It's so difficult if you think about it to keep up decade after decade of continuity between all of these different books. So, the idea that every single one of them is going to be a superstar is asking a lot.
Exactly. So we've got 3 books lined up for today. One kind of a classic one a more modern fun story, and another one that kind of falls in between them.
Yeah.
So
I would say. So what are we starting off with today, Zach?
I think we start this off on a very good note. Yeah. Let's start it off with the classic God Loves, Man Kills.
Excellent choice to start off with.
So God Loves, Man Kills was written by the X-Men guy, Chris Claremont. It was originally published as a Marvel original graphic novel in 1982. So this is a year after Dark Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past. Really, oh my gosh, I just realized that all 3 of those hit within a 2-year span.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's just this sort of creative high going here that Claremont's nonstop.
Yeah, he was on his A game, and he has an interesting collaborator here. Brent Anderson does the artwork on this, and he does the pencils and the inks on it. Steve Oliff does the colors for this.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not mistaken that I believe the original artist on this was supposed to be Neil Adams, correct? The version that I have actually has some of his original pages that got finished, and then he backed off of the project. So it's interesting that they switched over to Brent Anderson because the style is so different.
Oh yeah, I mean Neil has one of those kind of classic comic things, and this is a bit dirtier. I mean, this really starts to feel like some of the 80s comics. Like it's really changing from the early Silver Bronze Age stuff that you got in the beginning of Claremont stuff, the classic superhero stuff like the John Byrne. And then it gets to a little bit grittier, a little bit more realistic.
Absolutely.
Look here.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that, do we want to get right into it? I don't know how fast we want to, do you want to do some more intro into the story?
I mean, here's the thing. I feel like if you've invested the time to get into an X-Men podcast, you're at least aware of the concept of God Loves, Man Kills. Like, I don't think that's too crazy.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, if you're an X-Men fan, you've probably read this thing a couple times.
Well, and that's what I think is the best thing about God Loves, Man Kills. I can hand this to anyone. Anyone in the world who has a passing interest in X-Men And this is the story for him. It's the it's the equivalent to like a Batman Hush to me.
Yeah.
Because this is the greatest hits. It has the core team that you really think about. It's got your Storm, your Wolverine, your Cyclops, your Kitty Pryde, your Nightcrawler.
Sure.
It's got Magneto's in there, and Magneto's not the antagonist. He's not the good guy, but he's somewhere in between, which is the right place for the character at all times.
It's funny that you mentioned the lineup because, sometimes you see these classic stories and then they have some characters in them that you're not expecting. But this is about as distilled as you can possibly get with an X-Men lineup. You get the Kitty, viewpoint, and then it's all your classic giant X-Men characters. So,
yeah.
Now go ahead.
Yeah, what's Kitty going by in this?
I believe Ariel.
This was Ariel because she was Sprite first, and then she was Ariel for like a hot second. But I think this is this was
Shadowcat maybe.
Yeah, because Shadowcat happened after the Kitty Pryde Wolverine miniseries. And then she was that for a while until she decided that codenames were dumb for some reason.
Yeah, it's interesting. She's rocking, I think, this green and yellow, almost Banshee costume throughout this. So, if they had switched over to the blue costume, we really would have had it like locked in on the full classic here. But you mentioned Brent Anderson's art and the grittiness of this, and I'm glad that it's not illustrated by Neil Adams because. It does have a realism to it. It almost has a indie feel to it. And there's a heightened sense of violence. If you think back to Dark Phoenix Saga and editorially, they're correcting like Wolverine getting shot, right? He gets shot right in the gut and they're like, oh, it's a surface wound. It's a surface wound. You open this book and what is it? Like page 1 or 2 that there's children getting shot, so
right.
It's a big departure, I think, from what you were seeing month to month. It's very purposeful and it works very, very well. It's very effective.
Well, I think part of what plays off that is how they handle the villain, because Reverend Stryker in this, while he has still some sci-fi comic booky trappings with all of his purifiers and having a secret army, he's still a very down-to-earth villain. Like, he's presented very much in, he's a TV preacher with a suit and tie and white hair, and he's just trying to warn the world of all these demons.
And I think it's interesting that the character is developed like this because it's a very real world grounded, here's a guy you might see on the 700 Club or something like that. Right.
Exactly.
And yet there's only a slight touch of added super villainy to it. It's really about the ideology. So, one of the things that I think really works about this book and why, you mentioned I can hand this to anybody. It works in many ways because it's a very, very literal version of the whole idea of the mutant metaphor, which is always sort of like floating around in regular Uncanny X-Men continuity. But this is pretty straightforward about it. And it works. It works really, really effectively.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I think we've hit it 100 times. This is just a great distillation of everything that makes X-Men work. I think one thing that I do like that I don't think we mentioned is just how it ends. I think the fact that at the end of the day, the X-Men aren't the one to save the day. They aren't the one to get rid of the threat. It comes from a human, a baseline person just looking at this and saying, this is wrong. What's happening in this situation is wrong. This kind of hate is wrong. And it gives a tinge of hope that, whatever the X-Men are fighting for, this, Charles Xavier's dream, it can be achieved. And I think that's a great way to kind of close out this whole story, is by them saying, hey, look, there's some bad in the world, but it's not mutants versus humans. It's getting people to accept each other as people. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
No, and it does end on a more hopeful note, like there's this whole scene at the end where they're trying to get Magneto to team up and he's like, nah, I'm going to go do my supervillain thing. But you're very right that, the whole idea of the X-Men being more of a political presence and changing minds and hearts in that avenue is this may be the first time you really see that. It gets replicated in a lot of ways. I feel like we're seeing it a little bit in X-Men Gold right now. With the new villain. But it presents a standard for how that's to be presented. And you do see it in a lot of arcs.
Right. So I think with that, I think we've said a lot about it. It is the inaugural space on our list. So it is currently the best and the worst X-Men story of all time.
Oh, I didn't even think about it also being the worst. You're right.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I know what else we're covering today. It's not going to be the worst by the end of this episode.
No, and I think this could hold a pretty high place in the Pantheon, even after we cover a wide variety of stories, just for all the reasons that we've said so far. It's very accessible. It has a realism that maybe some people are looking for in their comics. And it's just a darn good story.
Oh, yeah. That's good. So, should we get to the down note, or should we get to the decent thing first?
I think we should move on to I think one of the things that we talked about was that we weren't just going to cover, the most famous arcs, the most famous graphic novels. So, if I'm not mistaken, I believe we have this standalone issue from Wolverine and the X-Men.
We do.
And I think that is probably a good way to go, because I think it should be our goal to sort of dig through and pick out some standalone things that are just completely off the wall. And the issue that we're talking about here is issue number 17 of Wolverine and the X-Men. Jason Aaron's the writer. But strangely enough, of all the people that could have illustrated this standalone issue, it's Mike Allred and Laura Allred of Madman fame doing the issue.
Well, you say Madman, but really, this is Mike and Laura Allred of friggin' X-Statix fame.
That's true.
Because this is a Doop issue?
Yeah. No, you bring up a good point.
This is the Doop issue?
Yeah, it's not like it's out of nowhere. It's just, if you'd been reading Wolverine the X-Men, I don't think you were quite expecting this issue to come out.
I mean, it's not Chris Bachalo.
No, exactly.
It's very different.
And if I'm not mistaken, this came out right on the verge of AVX, right? Like, we were all expecting some crossover. That's the weird thing about this issue.
It's in the middle of AVX. Issue 16 and issue 18 are AVX tie-ins, and you just get in there, Jason Aaron being like, I want to talk about Doop. I want to spend 20 pages and talk about some Doop. Because he really brought him back. Doop had, like all the X-Statix, quote-unquote, died at the end of X-Statix 28, I think? Doesn't matter the issue number. But Doop came back in... it was either... Was it the Valentine's Day issue thing? They did a Marvel Loves issue where Doop was in, and then I know they did one in Nation X that Doop showed up.
And then this is like his grand return as a member of the staff of the Jean Grey School.
Yeah,
but
and
he works there.
Yeah, he'd been hanging out for 16 issues. Just kind of seemed like a weird in-joke that Jason Aaron liked. And then they decided, hey, let's figure out what Doop does all day. And what he does all day is great.
Oh, man.
Because Doop is the guy that makes sure that threats are taken care of for the Jean Grey School. He's the guy who's going to, fend off the League of Nazi Bowlers.
Which is such a Madman thing. I go back and I'm thinking about the zombie beatniks and things that used to get thrown around in that series. It's such an Allred thing. And I wonder to a certain extent how much Mike and Laura had some influence on Jason in terms of the collaboration here with this story. Because there are things in this issue that are clearly things that the Allreds wanted to draw and color. And they play so nicely off of each other.
You mean like Doop and Howard the Duck fighting a robot apocalypse?
Yes.
Or
you guitar
Doop
battles.
fighting...
I wrote this down. He guitar battles Satan.
I believe beats him with the power of funk.
Yeah. Does he at some point punch Fin Fang Foom in the face on Easter Island?
Does that? I'm flipping. I've got the tray. Yes, he does.
I mean,
and then he fights Krakoa and some more Kirby monsters.
Yeah, and even on a more gentle level, he seduces some local school board members to make sure that they don't shut down the Jean Grey School.
Which, frankly, should have been the biggest threat the Jean Grey School ever faced, because that was not a great place. Like, you're an educator.
Yes, sir.
You're an educator, Adam. Do you feel like this is a great environment to mold young minds?
Well, and I love that the very first page of this is Deathlock, of all people, giving his, summary analysis of the school, its staff, its proficiency, of all the characters to be the person to deliver that information. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah, this is a good issue. This is when I did the coverage on Doop a while back, and I want to say this is the one that I selected for the must read because it's just pitch perfect.
Absolutely, and it has enough little Easter eggs inside of it that you can revisit it multiple times. I hadn't read this one in quite some time, and going back to it, just the second page alone, looking at the contents of Doop's desk, which has Devil Dinosaur beer on it.
Yes, it does.
Ecstatics, the movie on Blu-ray, an Ultimate Nullifier, a bloody yo-yo. Like, each one of these little things could be their own miniseries, and it's all presented on one single page with Doop hiding some risque literature, shall we say, as he's fallen asleep at his desk. It's so great.
I did not see the Ecstatics, the movie thing until right now. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
He also has a Tony Award.
Yes, he does.
Which, of all the X-Men to get one, why not? Maybe he can go for his EGOT.
He is a avant-garde, director and filmographer. So
yeah,
I imagine he could go for that if he wanted.
One of the criticisms that I've read about Wolverine and the X-Men is that, Jason Aaron takes too many liberties, that the series leaned on comedy a little too hard, and that it sort of felt a little bit outside of what we normally expect. But honestly, that's one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this series, because it felt like a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways. It wasn't stodgy. It didn't feel stuffy in any way. It was having some fun, which, you don't always see in X-Men books. A lot of them take themselves very, very seriously. So to have a standalone issue like this is wonderful.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Like I've talked about on the site and other places where Wolverine and the X-Men isn't my favorite thing that was coming out. But that's not because of the tone or anything. I think there's some structural issues. I think the Hellfire kids did not work out as well as he wanted them to, and having them be such a big part of the entire run, that didn't work well, with me. But
it's an interesting choice. We can probably get into that if we cover those arcs, but the idea to choose them as the bookends is an interesting scenario. But yeah, I think this book is a must-have. If you can find the back issue at your LCS, definitely grab it. It's so much fun, and like I said, it's got a lot of rereadability because of all the little Easter eggs in it. Each panel could serve as its own little offshoot. It's wonderful.
But let me ask: is it better than God Loves Man Kills?
I would say no. I think that. If I was going to give this to somebody, I would want to give it to an X-Men fan, somebody, or even a Marvel Universe fan, somebody that is going to be able to get the jokes. If you give this to somebody that hasn't read any of Wolverine and the X-Men, if you give it to somebody who, and that shouldn't be the criteria for all of this, but I don't know. God Loves Man Kills is going to be a very, very high standard to beat. But this is definitely a fun one, so it could be up there. Yeah,
I think you're right. This is a 300 level X-Men book. It's not right there for the beginners. I don't want someone to walk out of a Bryan Singer movie and say, "What should I read?" Here's this thing about this green floating potato.
It'll be like,
Go to town.
and he's gonna bash a nun's laptop in for making a comment about the school. They're gonna be scratching their heads for days on this one.
When Jason Aaron works, he works really, really well.
Yeah.
And this is a great example of that. And I think it's a solid number 2 spot right now. I think it's going to do better it's going to do surprisingly well on this list. It's going to be like the fact that Gold Balls is way higher than most people want on my character list.
Hey, Gold Balls is great.
Oh, I love Gold Balls. Yeah. And when we get to a Gold Ball story, we will talk.
He's a lot of fun.
But now we got to talk about the last thing on the list for today.
You threw this one on the list, so I'm not taking any responsibility for this one.
Hey, if we have to rank literally everything ever, we can't save all of the stuff that's not so great till the end. So what we have is Extreme X-Men number 25 through 30. God Loves, Man Kills 2 by Chris Claremont and Igor Kordy.
Deep breath.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah. I think this might be a good opportunity for me to just talk a little bit about, how I think in certain cases I'm definitely going to be deferring to you. You are, I think, just from our interactions over the years, I think that you're probably much more of an expert than I am on certain runs. My continuity gaps are mammoth in some strains of time. So Extreme X-Men, this is new to me. I mean, I'm looking at this going, I've never read any of this series, and this was a doozy, to say the least, to go through for me.
It's late Claremont. It's very late Claremont.
That's
This, and I'll tell you, not all of Extreme X-Men is this bad.
Okay,
but there's a weird patch. There's a weird patch here that it goes downhill. This story was originally ran, shockingly, right around the time that X2 X-Men United came out. When the first X-Men movie came out, if you look at the X-Men comics that were running at the same time, nothing like anything that was in the movie.
Right.
Nothing at all. It was Claremont's return, where there were a lot of stuff about the Neo. Mm-hmm. It's a bad run. I actually haven't finished the whole Claremont return thing because it's real not good.
It's shockingly bad.
And people thought it was going to be.
Yeah, to go through this on the same day that I was reviewing and flipping back through the original, I mean, it kind of surprises me that he was even willing to do this. There's an interview with Claremont in the back of the trade that I have for God Loves, Man Kills, and he talks specifically about how Stryker is not really a continuity character. That Stryker is a one shot thing that's just for this story, to tell this particular story. So to see him not only insert the character back into the continuity, but then tie him in with Lady Deathstrike, put him in, what is it, Mandroid armor? And then
it's Moses Magnum's Mandroids.
And then it's almost as if there's sort of like a drinking contest here for how many times he can get a character to respond to another character with another Bible verse. I mean, it's very, very difficult for me to read because it hits a lot of my pet peeves, that being one of them. You? What do you think?
Well, you just reminded me of something about this story, and I'm trying to go through my Twitter history to see it, because when I actually hadn't read Extreme X-Men until like maybe a year ago.
Okay.
And I just strictly remember, because I grew up with, going to like Christian school and all that, so I have a pretty strong foundation about the Bible. Mm-hmm. Chris Claremont not only has people quoting Bible verses, but he's quoting Bible verses very out of context, out of place, and not from the position that like Reverend Stryker, who is a, legal reverend,
right,
should be quoting things. Like, he should know better, even if Chris Claremont doesn't.
And I find as I go through this that, I mean, it is generally one of my pet peeves when characters talk to each other in Bible verse. Because you do see writers kind of fall back on that sometimes, if it's a quote unquote religious story. It baffles me it really does, that anyone, irreverent or otherwise, is memorizing all of these swaths of texts just so that they can have these pithy retorts to each other. It blows my mind. And also that it's not just Stryker doing this. There's multiple characters aside from him who are going back at him with it again. It's very strange.
Doesn't Kitty do it at one time?
Kitty
and she quotes the New Testament?
Yes.
And Kitty's very Jewish?
Yes. Kitty's characterization here, I'm totally on another planet with this. I have no idea. She's...
Well,
what is she doing? She's working in a bar?
There's a mini-series before this, Extreme X-Men Mechanics, where Kitty, she had been working for Excalibur, then she moved back to the X-Men, then she worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. for a hot second, then she disappeared and went to college, and started working in a bar.
Okay.
And it was a little weird.
It's
and
real
this was
weird.
Yeah, this was her getting brought back into the X-Men stuff. And it just didn't work all that well.
No, and especially, how far away are we in this context from Whedon's run on Astonishing?
Like a year.
Right?
We're like a year away from Astonishing. That just says, hey, Kitty Pryde's just been gone for a while. Let's forget all the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to have that sort of floating around in the periphery in my mind, at the same time that, we're seeing Igor Corti draw a side boob on Kitty Pryde in this bar, it's so strange to me that Chris Claremont, in all of his wisdom and putting together all of the modern continuity that we love and adore, really misses the mark so much with this story. It's tough.
I've said before, what Chris Claremont likes about X-Men and what fans like about X-Men seem to be two very different things.
Yeah,
like at the end of the day, I think his desires for these characters that he spent a lot of time developing, it's just very different than what a lot of fans want to see out of it.
Yeah.
And just on the other note, because we haven't touched it, I do want to say I think Corti, he gets a bad rap because his most famous work is stuff on Morrison's New X-Men, where he was rushed very heavily to finish. And it shows in his work.
Sure.
I think he's much better here.
Well, and I don't think it hurts that he's getting finishes from Scott Hanna. This does seem a lot more polished than what we saw with the Morrison run. I mean, it is jarring how the Corti issues stand out in the trades when you go back and you read those storylines, especially if it's paired with a Quitely issue right after it. It seems kind of house style. It's not doing anything super daring. The characters are interacting, and it just seems very. The storyline itself is pretty flat. They fall back on another trope, which I'm not a huge fan of, which is the sanctuary city led by the mysterious a benefactor who we all actually can figure out within 3 seconds is the villain of the story.
Yes.
Which I think it was Bunn kind of went back on that with an Angel story recently, correct?
Okay, I like Bunn's Uncanny, but his Apocalypse War stuff, I still don't actually know what happened with Angel.
No, that was very, I find that's a trope that writers go back to occasionally.
Yeah, it doesn't work well. I think it's fair to say God Loves Man Kills, the worst thing on... Or, I'm sorry, not God Loves Man Kills. God Loves Man Kills 2.
The sequel.
The obligatory sequel.
Which never should have happened.
Probably the worst thing on this list.
Absolutely. So for now, it's got to be number 3. It's quite...
Oh, bad. It's like, there's God Loves Man Kills, there's the one with Doop, there's a huge gap. God Loves Man Kills 2.
Yeah.
I wish it was going to be the worst X-Men story we're ever going to cover, though.
I'm sure there's worse out there, but for our first run, this is pretty bad.
Yeah. So we've got 3 up. That'll do it for this week. As for me, you can find this podcast on XavierFiles.com. That's where I have weekly discussions about different X-Men characters that come out every Thursday. You can also find bunch of other stuff on there. Follow me on Twitter at XavierFiles to keep in touch with everything that I'm doing. And Adam, where can people find you and your stuff?
Well,
what do you got going on?
You can follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy, and then you can go to my website, adamrec.tumblr.com. You're so awesome about reposting my Bish and Jubes comics when they come out. But that's always where they get posted. And then if I'm working on anything else, it's usually there too.
Yeah. Awesome. So there were a couple things we want to plug. This podcast and everything that I get to do with Xavier Files is supported by all you fans, everyone who's listening. If you've liked what you're seeing here and you want to support it monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/Xavier Files and throw in as little as $1 a month. That gets you line cutting privileges for the weekly articles I do. And now that we've got this Battle of the Atom going on, we're going to be I'm going to be changing that up to get a little different rewards, a little something for this. So keep in tune for that.
And before we go today, I just want to give a couple of little nods here. Our theme music is actually from the X-Men arcade game, which maybe you bashed some buttons back in the day. That music was composed by Seiichi Fukami, Yuji Takenouchi, Junya Nakano, and Hashimoto. And when I designed the logo for the website or for the podcast, it's many of you will recognize it. It's based on Dave Cockrum's cover for Uncanny X-Men 100. And it took me a couple seconds to find the other credit here that I wanted to give, which was the Battle of the Atom logo. It was designed by a guy named Jared K. Fletcher, who you can go to jaredkfletcher.com and see his other logo designs. He's done a ton of work for Marvel, DC, Image, even Archie. Definitely go and check out his stuff because, we want to make sure we're giving credit where credit is due.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I think that wraps up episode 1.
Yeah, not so bad.
Yeah, not so bad. Not so bad for our first time. We will see you guys all next week. We'll come up with a sign off. We've got time to figure that out. Bye.
Bye.
Get it!